Welcome everyone. I think we have most of the numbers that we were expecting to have. So thanks for your time this evening. My name is Richie German and I am an engagement specialist with EirGrid. We're here this evening to present some information on the Ward 400 kV GIS substation and invite your questions, which we'll get to after the presentation. So just in terms of housekeeping and how that Q&A will work, you should see somewhere on screen that there's a Q&A button. If you click that, you'll be able to type in questions and send them in to us. Um, I'll gather those as we go through the presentation and then I'll put them to the panel um, at the end of that. So just to introduce you to our panel, we have Dara McGowan and Caitlin Larkin, who are the project managers. We have Grania Duffy, who is Community Liaison Officer. We have Liam Wynne, who's an Agricultural Liaison Officer. Faye Lagan from the Planning and Environment team. And we have Tim Hurley from Transmission Power System Planning team. Um, Dara, I'm going to hand over to you now to go through the presentation. And just a reminder again, get all your questions in via the Q&A function, and we'll ask those after the presentation. Thanks, Dara.
Thanks, Richie. And again, thank you all for joining us this evening for this EirGrid webinar so that we can provide you with some project updates for this Fingal to East Meath grid reinforcement project. So let me know if that's the right view, Richie. Yeah. Am I on full screen there for that? Who is EirGrid?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
So who is EirGrid? So and what do we do? So EirGrid are owned by the Irish government, and we're responsible for bringing electricity from where it's generated to close to where it's needed via what we call the transmission grid. And the transmission grid is the very high voltage electricity network that transports the electricity. EirGrid does not generate electricity. Electricity in Ireland is generated by others such as ESB, Bord na Móna, SSE, Electricity, and other large players, as well as a number of smaller independent wind and solar developers. So this is a view of the EirGrid transmission grid. This is our existing grid, and EirGrid are responsible to operate this grid and to develop it. So the grid is comprised of our substations, our overhead lines, and our underground cables that basically are is the network that transports power around the country. So we transport power from where it's generated to close to where it's needed. And then the ESB then connect into our transmission grid, and they have their own distribution grid or distribution network to bring it further to down to homes and businesses. So the future of the grid. So the grid is always evolving and growing, but we have a number of specific challenges on the grid that we're trying to address. The demand for electricity in Ireland, doubled from 1990 to 2020, and it's doubling again between 2020 and 2030. And this is, because our population is growing. We've had significant population growth over that timeline, and our economy is growing. And so while we have that growing population and growing economy, we also have a move towards more renewable energy. So we're producing, so there energy is being generated in many more locations than previously before. So our job is to connect to all those new generation sites and to transport that additional power to close to where it's needed. And then we hand it over to ESB to bring it to homes and businesses. So the Fingal to East Meath grid reinforcement project. So the Fingal and East Meath regions are one of the fastest growing regions in the country. So there's significant demand for electricity in this region, and this project is to support the development of this area, to support residential housing, to support commercial growth and businesses. It also will provide a a transmission hub so that we can connect renewable sources onto the grid. And it also helps us resolve some capacity issues in this local area. So this project is solving a number of different challenges. In terms of project benefits, we've kind of spoken about some of these already, but to note that from a sustainability perspective, we're as people are probably aware, there's an Irish government and EU target that we achieve 80% renewable generation by 2030. So in March of this year, we had almost 50% of the electricity generated in Ireland coming from renewables. So we are making progress, towards these targets. And looking specifically at the Ward 400 kV substation. So the Ward 400 kV substation will act as a transmission interface station to transform electricity from very high voltage down to lower voltages, so we can pass those on to ESB and they can further distribute that on their network, to homes and businesses. This Ward substation will connect into the East Meath North Dublin circuit, which is a 400 kV circuit, and that circuit will be running from the Woodlands substation in East Meath near Batterstown all the way to the Bell Camp station in Clonshock. It's a 37.5 kilometre circuit, and the Ward station will be connecting into this East Meath North Dublin circuit. So what's happening now? So this is the EirGrid 6-step process to help us develop the grid. It's a very sort of structured process, and we're currently in step 4, which is where shall we exactly locate our infrastructure. Our next step is step 5, which is the planning application process, and we're about to commence the work in terms of our planning application process. And our plan is to submit our planning application towards the end of this year. In terms of our project process and consultation, I'm going to just ask my colleague Grania to cover this.
Great, thanks, Dara. Evening, everyone. So just in reference to the earlier slide with regards to our 6-step framework on how we develop projects, we have Tim here and the team who would have worked on identifying the need for a new solution and a new development in the area. And step 2 itself refers to what technologies will meet that demand and those capacity issues in the area. So as we progress to step 3, this is ultimately where we introduce the need for the project, the need for this development to the general public. So that kicked off in June 2024, where we initiated a leaflet drop to all the homes within that existing study area, which was to make them aware of this project development coming to the area. What area that had to be determined. We then carried out further on in October of 2024 a public consultation campaign over 5 weeks. We held information days in the Coolkey Lodge, St. Margaret's, Rogan's Town Hotel. I think those were the 3 venues. So it was kind of like in a triangle within the existing study area. And with that, a number of people engaged with us from communities, local residents, and we asked for their feedback with regards to their preference we brought 5 zones. So their local knowledge was key to how this project developed further. So coupled with that and information, we asked the public in terms of the technology solution, which was either an air insulated type substation, which is kind of the older type of technology that takes up significant land holding, or the newer technology, which is, you'll see further, I suppose, a suite of pictures, because no one size fits all, on the gas insulated building style solution. So we took all the feedback coupled with our multi-criteria assessment, which is technical, environmental aspects. Just go back up there another wee bit. Sorry, Dara.
Sorry, you're going. Yeah.
So our cross-functional team assessed all the public replies in tandem with that multi-criteria assessment. So in February 2025, we announced that Zone 1 would be brought further for further consideration, along with gas insulated technology as the preferred technology that we would continue to further also assess. We continue then to work with our land engagement team. Liam is on the call, and all the different functions across the team to assess a number of sites throughout the Zone 1. And ultimately that involved the creation of the Step 4B report in February 2026, which we actually uploaded to our website in tandem with the opening of this information campaign on the 6th of May. We try to endeavour to ensure that all the public within the, I suppose, area, the study area, receives information. So we carried out a leaflet drop within 2 kilometre radius of the proposed development site. We carried out ads on social media and traditional local media like the Leinster Leader. And we are holding information days. We've already held one and we will hold another one next week. So that's just kind of a brief overview, and I'll come back in after Dara and to talk further detail about, I suppose, the future of engagement with this site prior to planning submission. Thank you, Dara.
Thanks, Grania. Yep. So as Grania said, this is the we have another slide on this later, but this shows our sort of the wider study area where we're looking at where the locations would be, and we identified a number of zones, and then we eventually picked this pink zone here, Zone E1, and we chose this particular technology. And speaking of that, this gas insulated technology, basically what that means is it's a smaller footprint, and we basically house a lot of the equipment in these buildings indoors. So this is different from what you're normally familiar with. If you're driving around, you see a substation, what we call the air insulated switchgear. It looks a lot more industrial. So this is more what this project will look like. So the top left one actually is not too far away. That's in Belcamp in Clonshaugh, and you could say it's kind of more of a closer to an urban location. Whereas the bottom location here is in a rural location in North Kerry, and you can see that there's different types of buildings, but each one is kind of bespoke. So we've covered some of this, but the selection criteria, we go through a number of different steps, and there's been some consultation, as Grania has said on that. We look at a wider study area, we look at different zones, then we make we engage, there's been an engagement, then we do a multi-criteria assessment, we select the best performing zone, and then from that we look at specific sites within that zone to see what is going to be the best performing site. So in this particular instance, we looked at these 5 particular site locations in Zone ZE1, and we have chosen Site E, which is just east of Wards Cross, and a number of factors sort of around that decision. One, it's the site is a size that is going to allow us provide significant landscaping and screening and biodiversity. So that's very important. The size is big enough for our needs. It's not in a flood zone, and it's on our existing East Meath North Dublin circuit route, which runs along the R121, and it's close to other key transmission lines. So after a number of different factors, that is our preferred location. I've mentioned the East Meath North Dublin project a number of times, and as has Grania. So, but just to bring up to speed, that is essentially, as I said, a 37.5 kilometer circuit joining a substation, a 400 kV substation in East Meath called Woodland to Belcamp in Clonshock. We got a grant of planning for that last February. We handed that over to ESB then, and they tendered that out for a design and build in January of this year. They plan to award the contract to a successful bidder at the end of this year, and that will go into construction in 2027, and then that circuit will be energized in at the end of 2029. And I will now hand back to Grania to
Thanks,
discuss.
Sarah. Yeah, I know that there's an awful lot to take in from those few short slides, considering I suppose the volume and the depth of this development. But I did refer to Step 4B report, which is on our project website, so EirGrid/Fingal East Meath, and that Step 4B report will actually detail the 6-step framework and all the assessments and studies that's carried out to determine how we got to this particular location today. There'll obviously be a lot of different engineering languages and that which we can easily respond to if you have any further queries in relation to the steps that we take and the assessments, the rigorous assessments that we would carry out in order to get to this particular site location. I would caveat that any future, there's a slide there, if there is any future proposed circuits, that again, we will start back at that earlier stage of Step 3, where we would engage with the communities on technologies and locations in future reference. So this purely relates to the development of the GIS substation 110, 220 and 400 kilovolt. Back over to the public information campaign. We were at St. Kevin's Football Club last week, which we were kindly allowed to proceed ahead with that location, which was literally next door. So we thank those that allowed us to proceed ahead with that. We will be there again next Tuesday, this day week, between 12 and 7. I'm the community liaison officer for this project and also the East Meath North Dublin project. So you will see my contact details. I don't know whether they're at the end of this slide, Richie, but I'm available to meet one-to-one and chat at any time if there's further questions asked. So I think that just the second last slide there just kind of refers to where we are at now. So look, at EirGrid, we'll engage, continually with technical stakeholders, as we have to do throughout these steps. So whether it be Fingal County Council and Commission Penala and all the various other utilities in the area, and then also, from the key community people and residents that naturally enough have a number of concerns that we as a cross-functional project team are looking into with our consultants. And that's been a priority since the meeting last Tuesday. And we will endeavour to have a level of answers to those questions raised last week and concerns. We're at a stage where this is very much at a draft layout design. And the purpose of this whole information campaign and to discuss this here this evening is to get this feedback so that we can ultimately feed into the design that will be submitted to the planning authority towards the end of the year. I think that's really it for the moment. Over to questions, Richie.
Thanks, Grania. Richie, will I stop sharing? Is that the best thing to do?
I think it's best, yeah.
Yeah, I think stop sharing screen there. We have a good few questions in, so just to give me a second and I'll get myself sorted. Thanks everyone for your questions. You keep asking questions there. Just before I get into them, I can see one of the questions we got was actually just pointing out that not everyone on the Zoom could access the questions. but we are getting questions from quite a few people, and we haven't disabled the question asking ability for anyone. It should be the same for everyone. So I'm sorry if you don't have that on screen. I'm not sure if it's to do with your Zoom or what, but
Yeah, Zoom can be a
it'll be
difficult
available to
one.
everyone.
Just if you want to just write my email address into it there, that the contact me directly.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Um, so it's just
Thanks, Grania.
veronica.duffy@eirgrid.com.
Yeah, I'll put that into the chat now. And just to say, everyone, we have the information event obviously next week as well, if anything doesn't get answered today. Um, so first and foremost, Dara, question or not foremost. First, Dara, why is this needed as well as the East Meath North Dublin grid upgrade project that you're talking about there?
Yeah, thank you for that. We're, as mentioned, the grid it needs to evolve all the time. We've an increased um, demand for power, in this region, and in North County Dublin, and there's a lot of pressure to connect new homes, and this substation will primarily be about providing electricity to homes and businesses in this region in North County Dublin. It also, as I said, it is allows us connect locally, or in the general area, to renewable generation that may come, and it also helps us resolve some capacity issues in this region. Um, so it's a multi sort of factorial requirement for this particular substation.
Thanks, Dara. Yeah, guys, another question here. Dara, might be for yourself. How close is the substation to the nearest residences?
Yeah, we measure that. I believe our measurement is from the palisade fence, which is inside the folio, and I believe we're about 75 meters to the nearest residence.
Thanks, Dara. Another question here. What potential impact would noise and vibrations have on the New Park care home, which I think is across the road, down the road and across the road a bit?
So in terms of noise, we have done we've done extensive surveys in terms of environmental and ecology and technical, and we've done a baseline noise survey. And part of our design will be to produce a noise attenuation plan, to really mitigate sort of any disturbance from noise. That design is not yet complete. That design is ongoing, and that will be part of our planning application and our technical assessment and our application to on Commission Planola. So we have yet to conclude on that and to finalize on our noise attenuation design.
Dara, would it be
Thanks, Dara.
worth mentioning about the design of the site and how the noisy parts are being shielded?
Yeah, good point, Faye. Thank you. Yeah, we've the there are three of the GIS buildings, and the transformers, are located between them. So the buildings themselves will shield, the noise that will be, sound waves coming off those transformers. Each of the transformers also has its own sort of firewall and acoustic, protection as well. And we just have to calculate, as our design concludes, what's the cumulative impact of all of that, and make sure that our noise attenuation, is robust, and that design is ongoing. But there's already inherent noise attenuation built into our design.
Thanks, Faye and Dara. The question here, can the uh, outline of the substation layout be amended? Dara, I think I put that to you, sorry, as well.
Dara, yeah, I'll lead into Dara.
Um, The outline. So we have really tried to optimize the location within the folio. We're trying to do a number of things within on the site. Some of that includes biodiversity, a drainage plan from rain runoff, as well as all of the connecting circuits, across the substation. As we bring power in, we've got to connect to the buildings, we've got to connect to transformers, and it has to be the site has to interconnect to itself. So actually, there's a limited scope for us to kind of to modify our design at this point. We believe we've an optimal design at this point.
Thanks, Dara. Faye, I have a question here for you. Just what will the environmental impact be?
So as Dara mentioned, we have further work to do. So the planning application isn't going in until after the summer. So we are working through that. So we'll be doing, for example, ecology surveys. Are there? It's the land is farmed at the minute, so it's not there's unlikely to be badger sets as an example, but we'll be checking that. Are there bats in the trees nearby? So we're going to be looking into that. But environment isn't just the animals, the furry things. It's the agricultural impact, the archaeology, the flooding. That's something that came up last Tuesday several times. So we don't want to. We were not allowed, not even that we want. We're not allowed to impact the flooding. We're not allowed to make it any worse. But also, this is nationally important infrastructure. We don't want it to flood. And some people mentioned about the road flooding in the winter months, and it being an issue for the nursing home. We will need access to the substation, so that's something that we'll need to take into account. So we'll need to work with the county council. Is there an issue with the drains at the minute? Is there something with the road? Is it the surrounding area? So we're going to be having those conversations with the council to see what we can do, and perhaps that would be one small benefit of the project for the local community if we can help resolve that flooding situation. But it might be a wider issue that we need to work with the county council on. So in summary, a lot done, but a lot to do. And the report will be part of our planning application, and it'll be available to view online. And even if you want a paper copy, we can talk about that. But so people can study it, make your submission about it, and the commission, formerly on board Panola, will review it and see if the impacts are acceptable.
Thanks, Faye. And just there was another question there, which you're kind of responding to anyway. But have we assessed the real flood risk of site year round?
Yeah, so that's definitely going to be a consideration. And it's been taken into account in the area. Some of the other floodings are much, much worse in terms of flooding. In terms of this site, it's not beside a major river, in the way that some of the other sites were. It's got the drainage ditches down the side, and the people at the public consultation have identified issues with the road. So we'll be working our way through that. Just linked to that, Richie, if you don't mind me jumping ahead to the attenuation
Of course.
plant.
You see, oh yeah. All right.
That's a big issue. That's the reason why we're putting that in, is to make sure that we don't cause any flooding issues. So what at the minute, the rain falls on the grass and it slowly percolates and it slowly drains away. If we're making a large hard standing area, say like the roof, that water could go very quickly into the nearby drains and cause issues. So what we want to do is create a grassy depression, a hole in the ground that will absorb, that will hold any rainwater that comes off, and not flood the surrounding area, just stay where we want it to, and then slowly percolate off. So that was a major concern for some people at the public consultation last week, and it comes up in other projects. But the only water that will be in that pond, shouldn't have said pond, it's not a pond. The only water that will be in that grassy depression, that hole in the ground, will be when it rains, and then it'll quickly drain away as if what we call green field rates. So as if it were still a grassy field. So that's what we want to do. So there's going to be no pollution. There's going to be there's going to be nothing on the site that generates wastewater that goes into that. It's not going to be toilets. It's not going to be industrial. So the only thing that comes out of that area will be clean rainwater. So we're finalizing that design. We had a general area shown, and that Dara and his team have been working since that public consultation to go through that.
Thanks, Faye. Sorry, I'm just trying to group possibly some questions that are similar. Here's a question. Sorry. The site is under a flight path. Is that not a major risk? Faye, that might be another one for you or Dara.
Yep. So that is something that we have looked into and taken that into consideration. So DAA, Dublin Airport, have safety zones at the airport. So we're well outside that safety zone. So the planes come up over St. Kevin's, and so they're technically to the side of the site, but we don't see that as a safety issue. So if we were building it much closer to the airport, it would be something that we would need to work with DA on. But there's buildings all around the airport, as we well know, so we don't see that as a safety concern at all.
Thanks, Faye. Dara or Caitlin, this question here: how tall is the proposed building to the east of the site?
So the GIS building to the east of the site is
17.5 meters.
18.5 meters. Yeah, that's right.
Is it 17.5 or 18.5?
17.5 meters.
Sorry, I misspoke. 17.5. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Dara. There's a comment here as well. Someone who's read the Step 4 report, just Site D and E score quite similarly. The report does not provide detail on how each criteria was weighted for scoring each site. Do we have this detail? Additionally, the detail documented from the workshop, as this seems to be where decisions were made.
So I might address that. So they were very close. That is true. The challenge, the key challenge we had with Site D was that the shape of the site actually became a challenge for us because it wasn't. It's narrow at the bottom and gets wider at the top, right, from the R1 to 1 and going up. So when we're looking to put in sort of our landscaping and screening, we found that when we put our substation design footprint into Site D, that we would have to make significant compromises on screening and biodiversity and landscaping, which is a big challenge for us. So that was a key factor for us in terms of moving to Site E, which provides a much better opportunity to to actually hide this site away as much as we can.
Thanks, Dara. Another question. We've had a few of the same question really are very similar. Why not Site B? And they've outlined road frontage. It's a primary road, and there are less residents in close proximity. So why not Site B? I might have already covered that.
So Site B, so Site A and B, a couple of problems we had with Site A and B. They were further away from the R121, which is where the East Meath North Dublin circuit will be the circuit that will actually energize this substation. So this substation needs to connect into that East Meath North Dublin circuit. So site A and B were further away, so that that was a challenge in terms of cost and sort of the routing of that circuit to site A and B. Also, site A and B, are on the Ward River runs through or adjacent to both of those sites. So that also was site A has flooding issues, site B has some flooding issues as well, and there's more of an environmental challenge when we're building the site right beside the river. So there are a number of reasons why we deselected site A and B.
I'd probably, Dara, also add,
Sure.
when we were looking at actually the site selection, we would have engaged with all landowners, that had a suitable size parcel from Ashburn down as far as Wards Cross, and we engaged them and looking to, engage them on, by agreement, so that they are a willing seller of the lands, but also on top of that, you'd require a parcel that was within proximity to existing infrastructure. And like some of the sites that had their own challenges in that they weren't within proximity to either the road or existing infrastructure, and then they had flood risks as well associated to them. So there were larger sites, but it was the suitability of them sites when they went through the multi-criteria assessment. It just didn't suit, the brief that EirGrid had, for a station layout.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. Thanks, Dara. Grania, this is probably one for you. Public consultation. Sorry, it's a comment on a question. Public consultation is part of the site selection process. You have said that the public consultation and feedback is taken into consideration. How was this done for the substation if the material presented wasn't representative of the 22 meter, I think we said 17.5 meter buildings that are actually being proposed?
That's I'm not sure if that's a question or a comment. Well, I think Dara alluded to the fact that we have a design layout, and then Liam fed into all the number of factors that is required in order to find that most suitable site. When we engaged in back in October 2024, we would have asked people to submit their answers to a detailed questionnaire, whether it was online or in writing or email or whatever. So all of those, and that was after, several stakeholders or community residents asking questions on what is the difference between the technologies. And we had AO boards detailing I suppose the differences, the land mass that we would be required with one technology versus another. And then a number of, I suppose, local knowledge that was fed in with regards to each 5 zones that we brought forward. And then all of that coupled with the multi-criteria assessment of the engineering requirement, the environmental association, and all the deliverability parts. And that all, as I said, there's quite a significant amount of work. Like, these projects takes a number of years to come from, I suppose, an establishment of a need to energization into the network, and it involves and includes a number of engineers and various other functions throughout the business in order to get where we are at today. So Liam, would have talked to, I think you talked up to 70, 80 landowners, Liam, within that zone.
We did. So within the study area, as I outlined previously, that we engaged all landowners with a suitable parcel size.
Yeah.
So that's everywhere between Ashburn towards Kilsalhan, the whole way down as far as, I suppose, that Greater Wards Cross area, and out towards, actually westwards out towards the M2 also, and a number of landowners that we would have had previous engagements with also on the 1021 alignment. And actually from them, I suppose, conversations, then we had to follow up then with, I suppose, a range of surveys then held on individual parcels of lands. But what we found was, it was proximity to existing, as the connectivity to the proposed 1021 cable alignment. There was flooding risk, so there were other sites that were larger sites, but just they fell out due to suitability because of
proximity and various other
proximity of
parameters.
flooding. And the other thing as well, like, we're trying to achieve all of this by agreement with landowners also, that we don't want to go down the statutory route, and that's important note as well. But in all of this, I suppose the site that we're bringing forward is, technically it is the best site, that we could come or bring forward, I suppose, to this stage. All of the others had issues. If it wasn't flooding, it was accessibility. There's going to be all of these issues with all of the sites, but it was actually this site weighted actually the best. And even from a screening and environmental piece, there was less of an environmental impact actually on this site, given the fact, of its proximity to the likes of the Ward River. That is that was a big one as well. They're just some of the elements.
Just
that we're actually
so naturally enough, like with any development, there has to be parameters that we would have to, I suppose, take account of during site selection, and those factor in and include environmental, as you said, and then, as EirGrid do not go down the route of compulsory purchase order. So there is a significant number of factors as we evolve through the framework for grid development. And this is where we're at now in terms of public engagement and consultation, is seeking this feedback and working with the local residents, as we've just alluded to earlier on, and Faye mentioned it also with regards to the drainage piece and that we're all looking into those. So we do want to work with the communities as much as possible. We understand this is a significant piece of infrastructure. So we hope that we can work with you and, before we make that submission or make that planning submission to uncommissioned Penola. And also Faye mentioned that, there is that option for you to make your submission to that planning application also. Thank you. I hope I've answered that question. I'm not entirely sure if I have.
I think,
Thanks,
Grania, if you don't mind me adding to that, there's questions just about the visual impact.
Okay.
That it wasn't part of the public consultation, that we didn't have photo montages there last Tuesday, or indeed this Tuesday coming. But I think what you just said there, that this isn't the end of the public consultation, that the planning application is the planning process is a big part of that. So the fact that again, one of the other questions there about the attenuation area, and we're redesigning that. It's it's normal to take into account people's opinions on things and change things around before the planning application goes in.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Faye. Yeah, look, with regards to photo montages, absolutely. This is the piece of where we seek the feedback to be able to adapt and amend the development, subject to that it works from a technical point of view. But also, just to let those that are on the call that we can work with you to take, to get those photo montages specifically from your property, and that's a service that is available. Yeah, exactly, and we'll work with the communities, to provide that information on request. Absolutely, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So question here on visual impact assessment. For the visual impact assessment, the screen planting is prioritized over actual receptor sensitivity and residential exposure. How come actual number of receptors was not considered?
So I'm going to talk generally about our approach to landscape screening, and then how we take receptors into consideration when selecting the site. So one of the main reasons why we selected this site, Dara mentioned earlier that there's room for landscape planting. So we can, particularly on the eastern end of the site where the entrance to St. Kevin's are, and there's residential properties there, because we're 75 meters away from the fence line to the property, we have that room to put in a landscape planting, and there's several different ways that we can work with that. And one of the main people we'll be speaking to are the residents there. So what is the best solution for them? To talk about it generally rather than specific property, we can put in earth mounds or bunds. We can put in timber fences, solid timber fences. We can put in more mature trees. If you ever seen a new road scheme being built, they plant what's called whips. Small trees that grow fast, but they don't. It'll take 15 years to mature. We can plant in something more mature. And indeed, one of the questions there, Richie, was can it be done at the start of construction? Yes,
Mm.
that's something that we can do at one of the first acts on site would be start that planting, because we have that room to do that. In other sites, where it's more compressed and you don't have the room because you're going to be putting lorries up and down it, that won't be the issue. So I think no, I'm not. I don't think we think we can commit to that, to putting in the planting very, very early at the beginning of the construction. So, Grania, the construction is going to take 2 or 3 years. Was that right?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean,
So,
if the planning application is submitted towards the end of the year, I mean, there is no specific time frame by Commission Pinalla. So,
no, so the actual
the
construction
actual
duration. So
construction,
yeah, so
definitely a 2 to 3 year process.
yeah, so
Absolutely, yeah, more
we
so on
can
the 3 year
have
side.
that extra growth before anything,
Yeah.
before it's finished, rather than at the end.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
so the second part of that was how it was taken into consideration. Yes, it very much is. So to talk about it generally, we have 5 assessment criteria and then sub criteria. So environment and socioeconomics, there where the people come in. So proximity to residential receptors and how they'll be impacted in terms of landscape and visual, noise, what else? Traffic. Um, uh, all those factors are considered as part of the MCA. So what we can say is we believe this is the best performing option. That's what we call our preferred option, our best performing option, based on all the factors, on all the assessment criteria and sub criteria. So we have very much taken that into consideration.
Thanks, Faye. And thanks everyone for your questions. You've got loads of questions in here, so trying to get through them all. Caitlin, there is a question here. What is the closest residence to a similar substation in Ireland? I'm not sure if you would be the best person to ask that.
Yeah, happy to take that. And we did get that question at the Public Information Day last week. So we are looking to round out this answer a bit more, but certainly can provide an example of the substation in Knockgraha down in County Cork is in a rural setting, and the closest resident to that substation is little less than 65 meters, and there are a number of additional residences immediately adjacent to that substation. So, in terms of rural substations, that might be a good example, though, there are dozens and dozens of substations all across Ireland. So I can't confirm just yet that that is the absolute closest resident. As you know, we have substations in urban settings, and there are residences closer to substations than that. So we will continue to refine that answer, but just to provide an example.
And Richie, just to add to Kate's answer there as well, as she noted, there are substations right across the country, and she mentioned one there in Knockgraha, just north of Cork City. And just to note that EirGrid is developing a new substation in what we call the Dublin Central, or the city centre area in Dublin, on East Wall Road. So that is okay, while it's different in that it's in an urban setting, there will be quite a number of residences in the vicinity of the new substation. And as Kate mentioned there, we can definitely clarify, like, you know, where exactly is the closest residence. But just to note, yeah, this East Wall Road substation in Dublin City will be close to quite a number of residences in that area.
And sorry, I'm going to jump in again, Richie, just because I do
Yeah.
see there's a follow-up question in relation to this. And just to confirm, yes, the residences that I mentioned near Nakraha, within 65 meters of the substation, those are private residences. And as Tim just noted, those would be private residences as well.
Thanks, Caitlin and Tim. Next question. There's actually another specific question, I suppose, similar to the attenuation pond about entrances to the site.
Yeah, the second entrance was a consideration that we were looking at, and we are still examining if that can be removed. So we intend to have a firm response to that when we come back out on the next Tuesday at the Public Information Day. But we are investigating that robustly with our design team.
Thanks, Dara. Next question here, I'll pose it to the panel. Someone could take it. What health risks are associated with this type of substation for persons living close to the site? Are there any, and sorry, a separate question was, are there any health implications for humans or animals? I know we have a brochure on that we could look to circulate. Faye or Grania?
Yeah, I think that's yeah, we have our EMF document up on our website. I suppose electricity is heavily monitored and studied and has done for decades. I'm not going to profess that I'm a scientist by any means, because it's a very complicated area. But there's kind of a difference between your ionizing radiation, which is your X-ray, and your non-ionizing radiation, which essentially is what would be the EMF from the substation, which is extremely similar to your mobile phone usage to your ear. The frequencies that we would actually energize and operate our substations at is well below allowed levels. There's more detail in kind of plain English in that brochure, but it's regulated by ICNIRP, which is an independent regulator with regards to the non-ionizing radiation. There's endless information on WHO in reference to the various studies that's carried out, you know, in proximity to transmission or distribution substations. So it's heavily regulated industry. So I would say that at the levels that the electricity transmission grid runs on is such extremely low in terms of non-ionizing radiation. But as I said, I won't profess, you know, to be a scientist or a medical person, but we can absolutely give that information that has been written by the experts that regulate and study the electrical industry in Ireland and beyond.
Thanks, Grania.
Just Richie, on the next part of that, in terms of health, it's not, there is no issue from EMF, but health is more than that. The noise impact, the visual impacts can all contribute to that. So by as Dara mentioned, by designing the site so what's engineeringly noisy, what is traditionally noisy, is being taken away, is being shielded by the acoustic enclosures and a building away from the properties to the east. We're ensuring that there's no impact. Similarly with the visual impact, the visual impact. We talked about the screening and say the attenuation area, where there's no there's no pollutants being put into that, so we're not going to affect water quality in any way. So, that's in terms of the wider consideration. In terms of the impacts to animals, we're I mentioned about that. We'll be doing ecology surveys to see what's there and what mitigation needs to go in. So we'll be working with national guidelines in how we survey these areas and how we mitigate them. And then the likes of National Parks and Wildlife Service, NPWS, and the County Council, they'll be consultees. They'll have their in-house experts review our planning application and our proposals on those, but those are still being finalised.
Thanks, Faye. As I know we're coming close to time, we have quite a few questions to get through. So yeah, as I say, we're trying our best. And thanks for all your questions.
I do
Question
just
here.
see that there is
Oh, Grania.
questions again in reference to the public consultation feedback and the Step 4B report. I mean, there is so much factors associated with the chosen site selection. And then, as you mentioned, Faye, there's sub-criteria to those criterias. There's, I suppose, the higher level of topics is your economic, your technical, your socio-economic, environmental, deliverability. And I mean, then there's sub-criterias after sub-criterias. So I'm not sure, Dara, Kate, Faye, how we can kind of elaborate on, how the Step 4B report is very much a condensed version of how we choose a site, because the other document is ultimately extremely technical. An extremely technical document that I myself wouldn't understand. Only it's transferred down into what we work with NALA in order to plain English our documents for external consumption. So I'm not sure how we can elaborate, Faye, from the feedback that we receive from the public and how that's fed into the socio-economic piece. Which then translate into the chosen site and which the site that goes into planning.
So in very simple terms, Grania, the Step 4B, and sorry for that being a nebulous term, and an obscure term, it's basically a report saying this is what we think is the best option, and then we've gone to public consultation, and then we'll be using that to finalize the planning application. So that's how it's being incorporated. And one of the things that have been said to us, well, you haven't given us the exact design because it hasn't been prepared yet. So
Yes.
if we didn't have a public consultation, or we came out too close to the planning application, say the week before the planning application, you would know that we're not taking it on board whatsoever. So by having it at this stage where there's still time to change things,
Yes.
Dara mentioned about the second access. That's something that he's looking at. If so, we're definitely taking them on board in that way. So the planning application and the reports that'll be in that, and there'll be there'll be another brochure prepared at that time, Grania, to summarize everything.
No.
Sorry, it'll all be in the planning application. That's my mistake.
Yeah,
So
and I think then so kind of between a combination of this, along with what Liam had said in terms of engaging with 70 to 80 landowners, with parameters that was required. So that's how we get down to the site solution, and that's a very condensed version. But as I did say earlier, this is a long-winded, development strategy. It doesn't happen overnight. I think, yeah.
If I could just maybe refer back to one other question. A lady asked twice about waiting, and we don't wait. We don't. Grania mentioned the 5 topics, and then the subtopics within that, the 5 assessment criteria. The right answer, the right design, the right location is the best blend of all 5 of those. So we don't say economic is the most important thing. The cheapest design is not the best design. So it's the the best performing option is the best one in each of the 5 assessment criteria. So we don't say economic is most important. We don't say technical is most important, or deliverability. We look at all 5 and find what the right answer is.
Thank you, Faye. Is Richie there?
I think, did he have to drop?
Oh, he did intentionally.
I think
Or
Caitlin, you're
maybe
you've been made the host, whether you wanted to or not. I've got the questions open if you want me to read them out here.
Well,
we have.
there's
Sorry,
one question I see here, just in terms of the architectural treatment of the buildings, and yes, we do have, as part of our design team, an architect, and we're going to be exploring, you know, how we can, what is an optimum sort of or suitable architectural treatment of the GIS buildings. So that's something that we're working on. We're not concluded on that, but it is something that is part of our design process. And there's a question as well about that we haven't come forward with an example of this site, and but we are working on the photo montages. We have taken a number of photographs, and we are the photo montages work when we develop our landscape plan, so they kind of go together. So otherwise it doesn't give a fair reflection of what we think this is going to look like. So, but that is something we're actively working on, and we have some specialists as part of our design team working with us on that, and that is a work in progress. Like as Faye said, we're still in design mode here, for some of these things, and they're important, and we understand that, and we're working through them, and these will become available in time.
I just did see something about kind of improvements to the roads, lighting, and everything else there. I think, so will the road be improved as part of the works, pavements, public lighting, connecting to the Ashbourne Road? I think that's in the construction management plan, or a kind of a direction from the local council, because we don't own the road. It will be the county council, Dara, that would kind of.
Yeah, I mean the council are responsible for all of that. Where we have any intervention, on the road, we have to make good. So we've mentioned that we're going to, the East Meath North Dublin cable, which is running along the road, right, in a trench. When we lay that cable, we have to repair and make good the road, and typically the road is left better than it was before, because it's a newer sort of construction.
Yes.
And the council have very strict guidelines and how that works, and we're obliged to adhere to them, and we do willingly. But in terms of improving lighting and stuff, that is definitely the remit of the council for sort of street furniture and like lighting and things like that.
Yeah.
Paths, that really is Fingal County Council.
Yeah. And I think lastly there, and I apologise if Richie was managing those questions, so I apologise if we've missed any. But you have my email address, grania.duffy@eirgrid.com. I see the last question is, I think, was there a question in regards to the size of Knockgraha development? Did that come in there?
I'm happy to take that one,
yes,
Grania.
please.
I don't think we've answered it. So not 100% clear about the meaning of size here. The Knockgraha station is a 220, 110 kV substation. You might mean that, or you might mean physically how large is it? It's 13 acres. Just to note, Knockgraha is an AIS substation. So this is a good opportunity just to note that, because the Ward substation is a GIS substation. It uses less land than what a AIS substation uses. So even though Ward is a 400 220 110 substation, it will use about the same amount, 13 acres. So there's no difference in physical size in terms of how much acreage the substation occupies between Knockraha and Ward.
Thanks, Kate. And I think that the last question there referred to, can we get a recording on this? Yeah, I don't think that should be a problem. Again, Richie manages this Zoom because we only use this really for external webinars, and it's a very complicated app. So I'll get Richie to answer that. So look at I hope that we've answered as much of the questions that you've raised. As I said, please do contact me, grania.duffy@eirgrid.com. We will be in St. Kevin's Football Club this day week from 12 to 7. And I'm at the other end of a phone, which you'll get my number on the website. So it's EirGrid.com/Fingal East Meath, and you'll get all the project detail there. I hope you found it informative. You've met the team now online, so feel free to come and meet us in person next week. So thanks a million. Take care and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.